were to look at rivalries when it comes to off-roaders, I don't think it gets bigger than this. On my left is the brand new Maruti Suzuki Jimny. It's a product that has a lot of history in the Indian market. The Gypsy was the original off-roader that we grew up on, and it feels personal because it was the car that I bullied my father into buying as a 6-year-old many decades ago. But recently, the off-roading mantle has been taken up by the Mahindra Thar. It sells by the truckloads, it has massive appeal, and we're driving both today to find out what the Jimny does and what the Thar does and which would be the best one for you. When it comes to the design of the Jimny, we are the first country in the world to get the 5-door version. But still, it's a rather compact car. At 3985 mm, rather 3.985 meters, it's still under 4 meters. But we get 5 doors, we get easy practicality, and you get a lot of cues that give you the family lineage like the Gypsy, like the round headlights, like that grille, and you see more of that inside. Overall, I think it's a rather cute looking thing. But you have to understand, the Jimny compared to the Thar looks diminutive. While both of them are the same size, both are actually 3.985 meters, but its Thar is taller, the Thar's wider, and because of that, the Jimny actually looks a lot more smaller than the Thar is. But on the inside, it's a completely different story, but I'm going to come to that later. I think overall, the Jimny has this mini G-Wagon-esque look, which I think looks fantastic. I love the red color, and I think it's a brilliantly proportioned design. The Thar is much more aggressive, it's much more in your face. It looks like a complete off-roader. On the inside, it's a completely different story. I'll tell you that when we step inside both the cars. We hope you're enjoying the video. We certainly had a great time filming the Jimny and the Thar together, but there's something even more exciting for you. You could win some Jimny merchandise. For that, you have to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which of the two, the Jimny and the Thar, you prefer, and the merchandise could be yours. We'll announce the winner on our YouTube community post in a couple of weeks, so stay tuned. Inside the Jimny, there are a couple of things that I'd like to mention. One, if you're a Gypsy enthusiast like I am, you'll love the round dials along with the exposed sort of fake Allen key screws. Harks back to the original Gypsy. It looks exactly like that. Like, you also get the rubber boot below the gear lever. Those are some of the interesting touches that link the Jimny with the Gypsy. But otherwise, when it comes to space, well, let's just say because of its limited height, because of its limited width, it is small in here. You feel like you're sitting in a small car, which the Jimny is at under 4 meters. But you also get a lot of equipment. You get your big touchscreen, you get your Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, climate control, you get your 4-wheel drive controls. And I do think there are a couple of shortcomings in the Jimny. One, some of the plastics could be better. Two, the storage space. For instance, there's no way that you can store a water bottle anywhere in this cabin. And I think that is a bit of a compromise that you have to contend with. Overall though, I still think it has that utilitarian look, which looks great. It's basic, but it's meant to be basic, but it's got all the features that you really want. One of the biggest advantages the Jimny has over the Thar is in the rear seat and the boot. And let me show you why. A couple of advantages that the Jimny has is that because of its smaller size, it's much easier to get in and get out of than the Thar. Also, the rear seat is usable, but at the same time, you have to remember that headroom is at a premium. Anybody around 6 feet or taller will find this a stretch. Two, the seat is rather small. So yes, you can fit in 4 adults, but because of the lack of thigh support, I think sitting here for a long time might not be very enjoyable. But yes, short journeys, maybe a couple of hours, 4 adults, this is a totally practical package. And the 4 doors really help because it's just so much easier to get in and out of the Jimny than it is in the Thar. And another advantage is the boot, and let me show you why. Of course, like the old Gypsy, the tailgate also has the spare wheel mounted on it, and once you open that, Well, because of the angle it's looking a little tough, but it opens rather easily and you get ample space. So let's say if you're 4 adults traveling on a holiday for the weekend, I think you'll have enough space to carry your luggage. The other thing is that in the Jimny you also get a lot of options. For instance, you can get a carrier that you can mount on the roof, you can get tents, you can get camping gear. So all of that are also lifestyle options which make the Jimny a lot more friendly if you're into off-roading, adventure, camping. So obviously that works in the Jimny's favor. I've been talking about how the Thar isn't that practical or that spacious, and let me show you exactly why that is. Since the Thar is, like I said earlier, bigger, wider, taller, it's also a lot more difficult to get in and out of the Thar, but some things are better than the Jimny, like the seats. I really like the seats. They're supportive and I think they're much better than the seats in the Jimny. You also get all kinds of equipment, you get your four-wheel drive hardware, but where the Jimny has an advantage is that with the rear doors, getting into the rear seat of the Thar is a lot more difficult. It's not as spacious or as comfortable. So if you're looking for practicality, if you're looking to transport 4 adults or maybe kids or your pet, then I think the Jimny has an advantage over the Thar. But you can't deny the fact that the Thar feels more spacious, it's wider, it's taller, even though it's the same length. So that is something that you have to contend with. Practicality wise, the Jimny wins, but if you're looking purely for front seat space, the Thar wins. It also feels much better quality, but one of the factors here is that we don't know the price of the Jimny yet. If it's substantially lesser price than the Thar, then of course the Jimny could be a much better option. I'll try and get into the rear seat to show you how difficult that task is, and I'll also show you the very small and rather unusable boot of the Thar. So again, like I said, practicality wise, the Jimny certainly has an advantage here. Since the opening to get in the rear seat is rather narrow, you have to do a little bit of calisthenics to get in, and I have to say it's neither very practical nor very fun. But yeah, you can get into the rear seat. There's a little bit of space. I would say that the rear bench of the Jimny might be compromised, but it's better than what the Thar offers. And that's why, like I said earlier, the practicality of the Jimny is much better than that of the Thar. And let's have a look at the boot space to give you a full picture. Like the Jimny, the Thar also has the spare wheel mounted on the tailgate. And as you can see, the boot space is not really much. Maybe you can fit in 2 of these bags, but that's about it. So even if you are 4 adults traveling for a weekend, I think you'll struggle for boot space in the Thar. And it's also the question that inside the cabin there's not too much space, so it's not like you can keep your bags in the cabin. So on the practicality front, Thar does lose out to the Jimny quite a bit. Now let's get both on and off road to figure out exactly how they drive. When it comes to the Thar, I have to say the second generation Thar was a massive improvement over the first gen car. It brought in much more power, much better comfort, much better interiors, standard equipment. All that is there, and it has been a very successful car. People love it for its butch looks. It drives much better than the last Thar used to do. But the Jimny has showed that the Thar has a few flaws. Basically, while it is much more powerful and much more faster, the suspension tuning is nowhere close to what the Jimny is. Even on slightly undulating roads, the ride is all over the place. It's bouncy, it's choppy, the steering feels heavier. But yes, the extra power is very good, and the fact that you can also get a diesel option, which is not an option in the Jimny. But honestly speaking, yes, it has very good off-road ability, but the suspension and the high-speed stability is still something I'm not a fan of. And that's where the Jimny really exposes the weaknesses of the Thar. Now there's a direct rival to the Thar, and I have to say, when it comes to ride and handling, the Jimny has the Thar, well, licked, to say so. Also, I expect the Jimny to be substantially cheaper, so that does bring up one subject that we've seen spy shots of the 5-door Thar. Obviously, that will be imminent. That should be here, hopefully this year itself. But that will also put a very big pressure on Mahindra to price it in a way which can be competitive with the Jimny. The other thing being that unless they're extending the wheelbase of the Thar, rear seat space and the boot space, both of which are better in the Jimny, despite both being the same length, because the Jimny has a bigger wheelbase, is going to be another challenge that Mahindra will have to tackle. So yeah, I mean, it's had a great run in the market for so many years. In fact, this current generation has been selling like hotcakes from day one. But there is some real competition to the Thar now in the form of the Jimny, even though it might not look as aggressive. And I think that's going to force Mahindra's hand into upping the ante, and for them to further refine the Thar to offer a better package to their customers. So how does the Jimny feel against the Thar? Well, I have to say, they might be the same size, they might be the same segment, they might have the same basic purpose of design to enable you to travel long distance and go off-road. But they're absolutely chalk and cheese. The Jimny drives so smoothly, the suspension, even though it's a ladder frame chassis, the suspension is so well tuned, the ride quality is fantastic. The steering's light. Okay, it lacks the power that the Thar has with its bigger engines, but it's not underpowered, it's adequately powered, and it's simply fantastic off the road. On the road also, I mean, high speed stability, the handling, I mean, it basically drives like a regular Maruti would do. So you could actually mistake it that you're driving a Brezza or a Baleno or a Swift. It's very smooth. And one of the factors of why it does so much is because of how light it is. It's only 1200 kilos. That's why the 103 bhp from the 1.5 litre engine is more than sufficient for you to drive. Would I like more power? Yes. But at this power levels, I don't have a problem with it. And overall, because of the lightweight, the performance balance is absolutely fantastic. And that's where it actually excels over the Thar. Two key aspects. One, the accessibility of the rear seat because of the 2 doors of the Thar versus the 4 doors of the Jimny, and two, because of the lightness, it just has an overall ride balance, handling balance, which is simply fantastic. The Thar, even on slightly undulated roads, will heave, will be a bit, bumpy. Jimny, not at all. It's absolutely fantastic. And lastly, I think one of the biggest factors will be that the Jimny should be, if my estimations are not wrong, substantially cheaper than the Thar. So yes, you get a really, really good package. It's not perfect. There are a few shortcomings. I would like a little more power. I would like the quality to be slightly better quality of the plastics in some places. But overall, I love the design. I love the utility it offers. I love its off-road performance. It's absolutely fantastic. At the same time, not compromising on its on-road manners. So out of the two, and the fact that it's cheaper too, I would have to say the Jimny right now takes the cake when it comes to buying a lifestyle off-roader. And I think it looks absolutely stunning. And I think it's going to be a very big success for Maruti in the market. Unless, of course, they price it at some silly level, which might see the demand slip, but I don't see them doing it. So yeah, I mean, if you're looking for an off-roader, a balanced package, I would highly recommend the Jimny.